welcome to the show. I didn't realize you guys were there already. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about a few different things. First, taxes, how they're out of control, as well as the Bible, and a couple other things. Let me just get set up here. I didn't expect you guys to show up so soon. Does anybody know when taxes started? Let's see. In ancient times, the Egyptians, around 3000 to 2800 BC, the first recorded instance of taxes was the ancient Egyptian pharaohs would collect a portion of the harvests and other goods. Mesopotamian early records show taxes paid in the form of livestock and labor. Classic period was the ancient Greece in the 6th century BC. Taxes were levied on wealth and property. Ancient Rome, 500 BC to 476 AD. Rome implemented various taxes including inheritance tax and custom duties. Medieval Europe, feudal system, peasants paid taxes in good and labor to their lord. Church taxes, tithes were paid to the church, generally amounting to 10% of individuals' income. Early modern period, England, the first permanent income tax was introduced in 1799 by Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger to fund the Neapolitanic Wars. United States, the first federal income tax was introduced in 1816 to fund the Civil War, but was temporary. A permanent federal income tax was established with the 16th Amendment in 1913. The 20th century to present global expansion. By the mid-20th century, most countries had implemented some form of income tax. Modern tax systems, contemporary tax systems have become complex with various forms of taxes, including income tax, sales, property, and corporate taxes. Key points to highlight is ancient beginnings highlight the origins of tax in ancient civilizations, establishing the forms of taxation used. Classical influence explain how taxes evolved in ancient Greece and Rome, focusing on their impact on government and society. Medieval practices discuss the role of taxes in the feudal systems of the church. Early modern innovations describe the introduction of income tax in England and the United States. Modern taxation provide an overview of how modern tax systems function globally. Additional tips, visual aid, use charts, timelines, and historical images to make content images. Interesting facts include integrating anecdotes like the origin of the phrase death and taxes. Simplified explanations break down complex concepts into a simple terms for better understanding. Would you like more detailed information about any specific period of time? Yes. Let's talk about Canadian taxes. So, early taxation in the colonial period. In the early days of Canada's history, taxes were primarily customs, duties, and accession taxes. They were levied by colonial governments to fund political works and the military. Confederation was the 1867. After Confederation, the federal government began to impose taxes to support the new national government. Introduction of income tax. World War I, 1916. The federal income tax was introduced as a temporary measure to fund Canadians' involvement in World War I through the Income War Tax Act. It started as a progression tax on personal and corporate income. Post-war expansion, 1920s to 1930s. After World War I, income taxes remained as a permanent fixture. During the Great Depression, the government introduced more taxes to stabilize the economy. World War II, the need for revenue during World War II led to increased taxes and the introduction of new taxes. The federal government took on more tax powers from the provinces in exchange for transfer payments. Modern tax systems, 1950s to 1970s, the tax system continued to evolve with various reforms aimed at improving fairness and efficiency. Key changes including the introduction to federal tax, sales tax, later replaced by goods and services tax or GST. 1980s to 1990s, the GST was introduced in 1991 to replace the manufacturer sales tax, MST. The period also saw significant reforms in the income tax rates and structures. Recent developments, 2000s to present, ongoing reforms focus on making the tax systems more equitable and efficient. Recent changes include adjustments to personal and corporate tax rates, introduction to tax-free savings accounts, and enhancements to tax credits and benefits. Structure of Canadian taxes. Federal taxes, income tax, personal income tax, a progressive tax with multiple brackets, rates, and brackets and adjusted regularly. Corporate income tax applied to the income of corporations with different rates for small businesses and large corporations. Goods and services tax, GST, a value added tax of 5% on most goods and services. Excessive taxes levied on specific goods like alcohol, tobacco, and fuel. Provincial and territorial taxes. Each province and territory in Canada imposes its own taxes, including personal and corporate income taxes, sales taxes, like the harborized sales tax of HST in some provinces and property taxes. Provincial rates and structures may significantly vary significantly across the country. Municipal taxes, property taxes levied by the municipalities on real estate properties. These fund local services like schools, police, and infrastructure. Key points to highlight or origins and evolution. Explain the Canadian taxes have evolved from customs duties to a comprehensive tax system. World War's impacts. Emphasize the introduction and expansion of income taxes during the World Wars. The modern reforms discuss major reforms, including the introduction of GST and recent tax policies changes. Tax structures provide a clear breakdown of federal, provincial, and municipal taxes. Current issues mention ongoing debates and reforms in the Canadian tax system, such as tax fairness and efficiency. Additional tips, visual aid. So, federal government spending, Canadian tax revenues are used to fund a wide variety of public services and programs at federal, provincial, and municipal levels. Here's a detailed breakdown of Canadian taxes are spent. Healthcare. Canadian Health Transfer, CHT, a significant portion of federal taxes goes to the CHT, which funds health care services provided by provincial and territorial. Social services and welfare. Canadian Social Transfer, CST, funds support for post-secondary education assistance and social services. Employment insurance, EI, provided temporary financial assistance to unemployed Canadians and those on parental leave. Public safety and national defense, military funding for the Canadian Armed Forces and National Defenses Operation. Public safety include funding for the RCMP, border security and emergency preparedness. Debt servicing, interest on national debt. A portion of taxes revenues is used to pay interest on national debt. Infrastructure, public infrastructure projects, investments in transportation, public transit, and other critical infrastructure. Education, grants and scholarships, financial support for students through programs like Canadian student loans and grants. Economic development, innovation and industrial support, funding for research, innovation and support for key industries. Indigenous services, support for indigenous communities, funding for health, education, and infrastructure for Indigenous communities. Pensions and benefits, Canadian Pension Plan, CPP, provide retirement, disability, and survival benefits. Old Age Security, OAS, monthly payments to seniors age 65 and older. Provincial and territorial government spending, healthcare, provided provincial healthcare services, the largest expenditure covering hospitals, medical professionals, and public health programs, education, primary and secondary education funding for public schools, teachers, and educational programs. Post-secondary education supports the universities and colleges. Social services, welfare programs assist for low-income families, child protection services, and other critical welfare programs. Transportation and infrastructure, roads and public transit, maintenance and development of transportation, infrastructure, public safety, public provincial police services, funding for provincial police forces and emergency services, debt servicing, interest payments on provincial and territorial debt, municipal government spending, local infrastructure, road maintenance, and public transit funding for local roads, bridges, and public transportation systems, public safety, police and fire services funding at provincial police departments and fire services, recreational and cultural services, parks and recreation, maintenance of parks, recreation and facilities, and cultural programs, waste management, garbage collection and recycling services for waste disposal of programs, water and sewage, utility services, maintenance, development of water supply and sewage treatments. Key points. Healthcare funding emphasizes the portion. Okay, let's just do something here. Okay, healthcare services, approximately 20% of the federal funds to provinces and territories. Social services and welfare is approximately 10%, including the Canadian Social Transfer and Employment Insurance benefits. Public safety and national defense is approximately 10%. Funding the Canadian Armed Forces, RCMP, and border security. Debt servicing is approximately 8%, payments on funding national debt. Infrastructure is approximately 7%, investment in transportation and public transit. Education and post-secondary grants and loans is approximately 6%. Economic development is approximately 6%, support research, innovation, and industry. Indigenous services approximately 5%, funding for healthcare, education, infrastructure, and Indigenous communities. Pension and benefits, CPP OAS, is approximately 28%, payments for the Canadian Pension Plan and Old Age Security. Provincial and territorial spending, healthcare approximately 40 to 45%, the largest expenditure. Education approximately 20 to 25% for primary and secondary education. Social services approximately 10 to 15, including welfare programs and child protective services. Transportation and infrastructure is 10%, maintenance and development on infrastructure. Public safety approximately 5 to 10%, funding for police forces and emergency services. Debt servicing approximately 5%, payment on provincial debt. Municipal spending, local infrastructure is 30 to 35%. That's roads, bridges. Public safety is approximately 20 to 25%. Municipal police department and fire services. Recreational culture services, approximately 10 to 15. Parks, recreational facilities, and cultural programs. Waste management is approximately 10%. Services for waste disposal and recycling programs. Water and sewage, approximately 10 to 15. Maintenance on development of water supply and sewage systems. So, debt servicing payments are made to various holders of government debt, which can include both domestic and international entities. There is a breakdown of who typically receives debt servicing payments from the Canadian government. Holders of government debt, domestic investors, banks and financial institutions, Canadian banks and other financial institutions often hold significant amounts of government bonds. Pension funds, large pension funds, such as Canadian Pension Plans Investment Boards, investment in government securities to ensure steady returns for the future retirees. Insurance companies, these companies invest in government bonds as part of their asset management strategies. Individual investors, retail investors buy government bonds directly through mutual funds and exchange traded funds. Foreign investors, foreign governments, and sovereign wealth funds. Other countries and foreign wealth funds invest in Canadian government securities as part of the foreign exchange reserves. International funds, institutions, global banks, hedge funds, and other financial entities purchase Canadian bonds as a diversification and stable returns. International organizations, multilateral institutions, organizations like International Monetary Funds, IMF, and the World Bank may hold Canadian government bonds as part of their financial activities. Types of government debt: treasuries bills, T-bills, short-term debt instruments with maturities of 1 year or less. Interest is paid at maturity. Government bonds, long-term debt securities with maturities ranging from 2 to 30 years. Interest is typically paid semi-annually. Government savings bonds, CSBs, and Canadian premium bonds, CPBs. Canadian instruments aimed at individual investors. However, the sales of these bonds was discontinued in recent years. Debt servicing components: interest payments, regular payments made to bondholders. Regular holders to bond, and the money lending to the government, the interest rate of which is fixed or variable depending on the bond terms. Principal repayment: the return of the original amount borrowed, principal, when the bond matures. The World Bank is an international financial institution which provides technical assistance to developing countries for deployment projects, development projects, including bridges, roads, schools, and other infrastructure projects that are expected to improve economic prospects and quality of life. Here is a detailed overview of the World Bank, which you can use for your YouTube video. Overview of the World Bank. Structure and organization. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. The IBRD is one of the 5 member institutions that make up the World Bank Group. It provides loans to middle income and credit-worthy low-income countries. International Development Association, IDA. The IDA provides concessional loans and grants to the world's poorest countries. Together, the IBRD and the IDA make up what is generally known as the World Bank. History. Establishment. The World Bank was established in 1944 during the Bretton Woods Confederation. Conference, alongside the International Monetary Fund (IMF). Its initial goal was to help rebuild Europe countries devastated by World War II. Evolution. Over the decades, the World Bank focuses shift towards poverty and reduction and sustainable development. Mission and goals. Poverty reduction. The primary mission is to reduce poverty by providing loans and grants for development projects that can improve economic development and lifting standards. Sustainability development emphasizes on projects that are environmentally and socially suitable. Functions of the World Bank. Funding development projects. Infrastructure. Projects include construction of roads, bridges and power plants. Education. Funding schools, training, and educational reforms. Health. Investments in hospitals, healthcare systems, and the disease prevention program. Agricultural. Support for agricultural development and enhanced food securities. Provides technical assistance, capacity buildings, training, and advisory services to help countries improve their government and infrastructure. Institutional capacities. Research and analyze. Provide data, research, and analyze to inform policy making. Promoting economic policies, advising countries on economic policies and reform to promote growth and reduce poverty. Economic monitoring, reducing research, conducting economic research and monitoring global economic trends. Funding the operations. Sources of funding. Member contributions. The World Bank is funded by contributions from its member countries. Borrowing from financial markets. The IBRD borrow at low interest rates from global financial markets and passes on the benefits to borrowing countries. Loan repayments from borrowing countries also fund the bank's operations. Loan terms. IBRD loans generally offered at market-based interest rates with long maturities. IDA loans, concessional loans with low to zero interest rates in long repayment periods. Impact and criticism. Positive impact. Economic growth. The World Bank has funded numerous projects that have contributed to economic growth and development in many countries. Poverty reduction, succession projects have improved access to educational, health, and clean water, lifting millions out of poverty. Criticism and controversies. Environmental and social impacts. Some programs have been criticized for their environmental and social impact, including displacement of communities. Debt burden. Loans can increase the debt burden of developing countries, making it difficult for them to achieve financial stability. Conditionality. Criticism over the conditions attached to loans, which some argue can be undermined national sovereignty and prioritize economic reforms that may not benefit the poorest populations. Okay. I'm just going to take a quick break. I'll get back to this.